A lot of people are paying attention. That's what I can say.
Welcome to Shadow of Truth, and today is Thursday, December the 17th, 2015, and your hosts are Dave Kranzler and Rory Hall. Dave, how you doing today?
I'm doing well, thanks. How you doing?
I'm all right. We have a show coming up for you folks that is going to blow your mind with Dr. Paul Craig Roberts. But first, Dave, I know you had something that you wanted to share with the folks, and have at it.
Yeah, thanks. I just wanted to mention I've introduced, after many inquiries encouraging me to do this, I've got a new monthly subscription service called the Short Sellers Journal, and I think it's an opportune time now to start shorting the market. And the way it works is once a week I will be delivering to your mailbox, your inbox, a newsletter that will have typically two ideas for short selling the market. I'll also cover a little bit. I'll mention, some gold and silver mining stock ideas, and then I'll also have, my take on the economy. It's going to be, a 2-3 page quick newsletter once a week. So it'll be 4 times a month, and it's a monthly subscription basis.
That sounds pretty cool, actually. I mean, so not only am I going to get ideas on how to make money, but I'm also going to get your ingenious analysis.
I wouldn't necessarily say it's ingenious, but
I would.
like I'll have a feature in there, not every week, what you might have missed, because a lot
Yeah.
of people follow the markets, but we all can't follow all of the news. And for instance, yesterday at the end of the day, I sent around a real brief email to my subscribers discussing why I thought the stock market had the reaction that it did after the Fed raised rates. So it'll be, little things like that.
And speaking of the Fed's raising rates, I think that's one of the only things that we didn't cover with Dr. Robertson. And what do you think about this? What I'm calling a phantom rate hike. I mean, it seems like total nonsense and a non-issue to me, or is that right?
It is a non-issue. I think there's a couple things going on there. I think they knew that the market would probably react the way that it did, because now I think the expectation is it'll be one rate hike and that'll be it, because by the time the next meeting comes around, it'll be clear that the economy's really going into a deep recession. And I wrote a blog piece about this last week where I said they're going to raise rates and the market will probably shoot higher on the expectation that it'll be one and done, and then the next move after that would be some sort of monetary easing implementation, not necessarily QE, but something that looks and smells like QE. They won't call it that.
Well, they can't use that term anymore.
Right. And then the second reason is that the banks are not making any money on their loans, because they're what's known as their net interest margin, which is their cost of funds minus what they can lend their funds out. They're not really making any money on that. Well, what this allowed them to do is they'll still be borrowing money from the Fed at roughly 0.25%, and then they can turn around and lend it out at higher rates. In fact, all of the banks went and raised their base consumer rates yesterday. So they're going to make money that way, and it also allows the big banks who have excess reserves through the Fed funds repo mechanism to lend money to smaller banks that don't have excess reserves, and it raises the amount of interest that the big banks get, that's what the Fed funds rate is. It's the interbank borrowing rate. So the banks that have money lend short-term liquidity to the banks that need money for whatever reason, and it allows the banks that have money to charge a slightly higher interest rate to the banks that need to borrow the money. And it may not sound like a lot, but a quarter of a percentage point, 25 basis points, when you're talking about basically trillions a year in transactions, is a lot. It adds up to a lot of money. I mean, that's how banks make money traditionally.
Yes.
And that's what the primary motivator was there. But everything else was nothing but a distraction.
And the whole thing is a distraction. And the reason that I say that with such confidence is that this morning, the morning after, Talking Head, Good Morning America, and I thought I was going to fall out of my chair. This woman actually said that the posturing by the Fed yesterday was a signal that they would be raising interest rates to 1% to 1.5% within the next year. So this is the next day. I mean, it's just ridiculous. Do you think that they would ever be able to get to raise interest rates to 1% or 1.5%? Is that even possible?
My personal view is no.
It would blow up the system, wouldn't it?
I'm guessing the system probably blows up anyway, but at this point, it's hard to say. I mean, no one can really tell for sure what the Fed's trying to get accomplished out here. Certainly, it's not the implementation of responsible monetary policy, because the taking rates down as far as they did and printing as much money as they did, that could never be seen as responsible monetary policy either. And they're not going to be able to reverse it. And if they do try and reverse it, it's going to throw this system into a depression that'll make the 1930s depression look like a picnic.
That's what I thought too. That it's impossible for them to do that. I mean, they just can't do it. They can't do it. But anyway, without any further ado, let's bring on Dr. Roberts and see what's on his mind. What you're about to hear is not the program that Dave Kranzler and myself had put together. We had a completely different agenda. Dr. Roberts, however, had his own ideas, and we're very grateful for that. What you're about to hear is one of the most important conversations that you will ever hear. This is completely unscripted. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of good people out there. They just need understanding and leadership. And I think that's what we're trying to give them, right?
Well, aren't they going to get it from either Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump?
They don't expect it to come from the political sector.
I think that's people are starting to catch on to that.
Yeah,
comes from.
Well, that's really Trump's popularity, because he's not associated with the political sector.
Yeah, I agree.
And not that he knows what to do or would have any advisors who knew what to do.
Do they currently? Do the ones in office right now? Do they?
No, but I'm just talking, Rory, that people's hopes for Trump, because he's outside the system, he speaks against it, he's forceful, he doesn't back down. They see in him a leader.
Yes.
And that's probably a reasonable perception. I mean, it could all be an act, but I suspect he is capable of leading. But the problem is he himself doesn't know what to do, and he doesn't know the people who do know. And even if he knew people like us, the Senate would never confirm us. None of the three of us could get confirmed by the Senate. Even if he knew people and tried to put them in, they'd get blocked. And my view has always been that political change in the United States is not possible to come from within the system, because the candidates don't represent movements. There's no movement behind them. It's not been a long struggle to rise up to a challenger position. The leaders of such a movement don't know who the people are in it that they can trust, that they can put in office to carry out the platform. And without a powerful movement and a big mandate, an ordinary person who just happens to get the nomination, even if he knew what to do, he hasn't got the power to get the people confirmed by the Senate. So I don't think political change from within the system in the United States is possible. We see if in France that this Marine Le Pen, she's carried on her father's work with the National Front, and they slowly gain influence, they slowly gain votes, their percentage slowly rises. They've had some remarkable success in local and regional elections, but it's been a long, hard pull, and I always expect that if she were to really break through and be a main candidate, she'd be assassinated. Either literally her life would be taken, or they would do her in with slander and libel, constant accusations in the press, and destroy her and the party in that way. Remember what they did to Strauss-Kahn.
Exactly. That's what I was saying. You're thinking.
Bring that up. Yep.
He was the head of the IMF. He was clearly going to be the next president of France. And they just took him right out with this false arrest in New York. And it was obvious to me from day one it was totally false, but about 95% of the Americans fell for it, and a lot of the French fell for it. I think now they see that it was all an orchestration to keep him out of the office. But it doesn't seem that people actually recover from this, even when they are vindicated. So he's not now a presidential candidate, even though he was vindicated and everybody now knows it was a frame-up job and that we were behind it because he wasn't our guy and Sarkozy was. So I think the same thing, you can see it in England, where this Jeremy Corbyn has gotten in as head of the Labour opposition. And yet you had one of the ranking generals in the British military state to a journalist, it was published, that they would never permit him to form a government. So here you see the British military saying, we don't accept all the people's choices. If they choose him as prime minister, we're going to nix it. And you see as well that there are many members of his own party that don't support him. They've been bought off. They're the Tony Blair types who are now in the pockets of the banks and the corporations and want to privatize everything and are taking payoffs. So money corrupts everything. You may remember the piece I wrote about how the banks have turned so many of the young women in Greece and driven them into prostitution. Yep. And that so many of them are now in prostitution that the cost of a woman's body for an hour is $4.24, wow. Which they can't get past lunchtime. So I wrote this, and then I got letters from women around the world, and letters came in, for example, from Portugal, and they said the bastards have done the same thing to us, and husbands can't protect their wives, the young guys can't protect their girlfriends because nobody's got any money, and the choice is starvation or prostitution. And this is what capitalism has done for people. It's become, once it was deregulated, once the financialization of the economy, by the big banks, which Michael Hudson has so completely and convincingly explained. Once this happens, capitalism is just a totally evil, exploitative system. It has no virtues. There's nothing going for it. And all of the reasons that justified capitalism are gone. It doesn't serve the general welfare. It doesn't prevent misuse and misallocation of resources because they're too big to fail and they're bailed out by the taxpayers or by the Federal Reserve creating money, thus stopping any return to savers. The other justification for capitalism is that it achieves social welfare. Well, how do you got social welfare when all the good jobs are offshored, and everything else is financialized. That means all the economic rents are extracted and converted into debt instruments that pay interest to banks. And that's the only way the financial system works now. It basically extracts all the economic surplus from the economy, converts it into debt instruments, and then the banks are paid interest. So it's an exploitative system, and you can see it so clearly in the countries where it's forced young women into prostitution.
Which is ridiculous. And the banks are not only too big to fail, they're too big to jail, according to Eric Holder, who exonerated them of any wrongdoing.
Well, he's paid off too. They're all. It's very easy. I mean, they are. It's a corrupt system in which everybody is paid off. In fact, I got one letter from Portugal in which they said, "Look, even the left-wing parties are in on the take. They talk the rhetoric, but they behave just like the right-wing parties once they're in office." And somebody said even the Communist Party in Portugal is corrupt. It behaves just like robber baron capitalists. So I think what's happened is everybody wants the money, and nobody has any integrity, or there's no sort of cause or anything to stand for except money. And that's the final sort of unfolding of all of Marx's predictions. You know, Marx said that capitalism turns everything into a commodity that can be bought and sold. Honor, integrity, truth, everything, he said. And you know, in other words, it goes far beyond exploiting labor. It's everyone's exploited by when the banks financialize the economy. But it now goes into the values themselves. The values themselves are corrupted and turned into ways of being paid. So in that sense, capitalism makes everybody a prostitute, not just sexually the women, but everybody becomes a prostitute. And that's what we're witnessing, isn't it? I mean, how can the Attorney General of the United States say, well, we can't, we have to give big banks a pass to commit felonies?
Right.
I mean, this is what he said.
And high crime.
He said.
I mean,
it's exactly what he said.
Yep.
And Congress says, we have to give the executive a pass to violate all of our domestic laws against torture, all the international laws against torture, all of the restraints on the Constitution places on the executive, that you can't go to war without an act of Congress. We just have to let the executive be an unaccountable dictator. Now, that's what the Congress, they've completely abandoned all of their responsibility. The courts have too. What do the courts do about these fantastic violations of the Constitution? Indefinite detention without due process, murder of citizens without due process. It's just an amazing thing. The whole system has given way. There's not any integrity in any institution, and nothing means anything. The law is only applied to the helpless. Only the helpless get the benefit of being prosecuted.
You know, I mean, the same things, you know, that referring to the email that you got from Portugal, I mean, it's the same thing here. The left and the right, the Democrats and the Republicans are all in on the same take. I mean, right. Now that once Ron Paul left Congress, I don't think you can point to one single congressman in either house and in either party who's not been corrupted by corporate money. Well, and I saw yesterday, I saw a news report, and I can't remember which house is drafting the legislation. I think it's the Senate. Right now, when corporations donate political money, the SEC requires disclosure. And the Senate, it's either the Senate or the House, is drafting a legislation that would enable corporations to get around that SEC mandate, and it would enable corporations to donate money to politicians without disclosure.
Yeah.
I mean, to me, that's just incredible. It's just, I mean, it's.
I thought they were already able to do that through the PACs, or is that not right? Through the political action committees, can they?
No,
not?
corporations have to disclose when they donate money,
but there's no longer limits on what.
and there's no limits. That's correct. That was the Citizens United Supreme Court decision, which basically, to me, that was the last nail in the coffin of our system.
Yeah, and remember now, this was the 5 Republicans. And you remember all the Republicans, oh, we have to get Republican presidents so we can get Republican Supreme Court justices, or the Constitution is lost. You remember all that, right?
Yep.
Nonsense.
As soon as they got a Republican minority, a majority, the Constitution was lost. Totally lost. They've done nothing about the torture, the murder, the indefinite detention, or anything else. In most of the cases, they won't even look at. So you can't even bring a challenge to the government's crimes. Look, David, I'm not sure that all of the congressmen. There was one other one that was left at the time of Ron Paul, the Democrat, who got redistricted by his own party. What was his name? You know who I mean.
What state? Which state?
Somewhere in the Midwest, I think. He's a feisty guy. I don't know why the name slips my mind, but he was once, I think, ran for the Democratic nomination the last time or two. I mean, he was very feisty, like Ron Paul, just coming from the other party. And there are 2 Republicans. What about this Robacher from California? He's always giving them fits. And there's the guy from North Carolina whose name
Trey Gowdy.
No, the guy from North Carolina is the one. He's the one. I think it's North Carolina. He's the one who, when all this 9/11 started, you remember France wouldn't agree to attack Iraq initially.
Yeah.
And so he said, we're not going to call them French fries anymore. We're going to call them freedom fries. It was that guy. He's completely changed his mind. He's been very, very brave. But that's the only 2 that are still in that I can think of. I wish I could remember his name. I was once in contact with him. So, but what it shows is how few. I mean, we're talking about 535 members of the House and Senate, and I can think of 2. And the other 2 before them are gone. Ron Paul and Kucinich, Dennis Kucinich.
Oh, Kucinich, yeah.
Now he was a fight.
Yeah, you're right. He wasn't. I don't think he was bought out either.
No. He got his own party redistricted him out.
I remember him. I used to like him. Yeah, you're right. He was his own man.
He's a very good person, sensible, understood what was happening, tried to give leadership. Couldn't happen. See, not even the people that he was representing and the people into whose district he got redistricted had enough sense to appreciate him.
Well, that's why he got redistricted out, because he couldn't be bought off.
That's right, of course. And so, but what I'm talking about is the voters were so ignorant. They didn't realize that they had a leader they need to hold on to, no matter what district he was in, or what party. Or you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So how can you have leadership when the people are incapable of recognizing it?
The end of part 1, and if you will click the screen for part 2, we will continue the conversation.